Welcome to this. It's almost like a mini conference, isn't it? It's a 3-hour affair split into two parts, and this is basically one session that we've got as part of our Reboot Reading initiative, and we're using that hashtag. So please do use that to spread the word. And it's all about creating a new normal for organizations and for people as they go back into work, and also perhaps in a broader sense around Reading as a community and striving and developing Reading as a community in the way we would like it to be. So the pandemic has given us some space in some ways to reflect, and so we want to use that space and start a conversation, and this is part of that. Reboot Reading. We want to start a conversation around the kind of place we want Reading to be, but it's also the kind of places we want our work places to be. So thank you for joining. And with that, let's kick off. I'll give you just a bit of an oversight into the agenda. So I won't take too much time. Just want to sort of introduce the topic, and then we'll get into the first part. And that really is around getting some insights from leaders of very interesting organizations, I think you agree, once they've kind of explained a little bit where they're from, into what the new normal could be. And the reason we have selected these leaders is because they're from organizations that in many ways exemplify the kind of workplace and the kind of new normal which would be great to be the standard kind of workplace as we go forward. So we've got Paul from Cotswold Fair, we've got Bruce from Blake Morgan, Sean from A&D Digital, Rachel, who's Deputy Mayor from Hollybrook, and Julia from Santander. So that will be the first part, and this really is a kind of discussion, panel discussion, and then we'll have some time for Q&A from the audience as well. Around about 10 to 11, I'm going to sort of start and introduce the second part. And the second part really is, well, that's great. We've seen what the new normal could be. Well, how do we start creating that kind of place? How do we start doing that inside our organization? And we've got some fantastic speakers there, and I'll go through them later when I introduce the second part. That'll go through and explain in small presentations, around about 20, 25 minutes each. And we've got two streams, one focusing around culture and organizational culture, and the other one around well-being, particularly in times of, current times of anxiety. So we do hope you'll stay for that. I think you'll get some super insights and tools through those different sessions. So first off, why are we talking about this new normal? Why not just go back and, people talk about a V-shaped recovery and just go back to where we want to be in quick and orderly fashion and just accelerate that process. Certainly that is something we want to do. We do want to accelerate process, but at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we do have an opportunity here. We've suffered as a community some huge losses, terrible losses. Many loved ones have passed away. Many others have been seriously ill and will be ill for a long time. Everyone's lives have been disrupted. So this is a great opportunity to really kind of reflect and see, well, what could we do as we go forward differently? And what does that difference look like? And this is where, I want to highlight just a few things that we go through. Sorry. I'm going in the wrong direction. I just want to highlight a few things that we've noticed as we go through the pandemic. And one of the interesting things is, of course, we've been locked down, and so people have had to work from home where it's possible. And it's interesting, actually, that really has worked for a fair number of people. And this is from The Guardian over the last week, and they found that the working families, 13% of working parents actually don't want to go back to the old normal. 30% that don't want to go back to the old normal. The remainder, the vast majority, really like the flexibility. They really like the fact that actually they're spending more time with their children and other family members, and they would like a greater balance between where they work, how they work, and their home life. I do realise, of course, for some working people who are working from home, it actually has been more difficult than it would otherwise have been. But nevertheless, I think this is an interesting data point. Another thing that really has come up and is very interesting is the rise in anxiety, the rise in mental health issues. The London School of Economics commissioned some work, were involved in some work around this with Jacobs and Symmetrica, and they found that actually the daily cost of well-being in the UK was something like £2.2 billion. That's something like £43 per adult per day. That's per day, that cost. And this is a significant issue, certainly during the pandemic. But actually, mental health is an issue that's been overlooked, and even before the pandemic. So one of the interesting things is when we were talking to our partners, we called out around the beginning of April to a number of our partners just to understand how they were experienced the pandemic and what they were doing in terms of their staff. And the interesting feedback we've got is actually they're going overboard in terms of actually deliberately going out on a much more regular basis to touch base with their staff, to understand how they're doing, that they're feeling okay, that they're feeling included, because isolation is a big issue. And so that was great news. But how do we carry that forward on as well? So, perhaps to some extent, the people that are our partners are self-selecting. They're more ethical. They take greater care of the people that work for them. But how do we make that, pervasive across the industry? That as we come out of this, managers are tuned into the mental health of their employees, and they understand the signs of burnout, the signs of anxiety, and they're equipped and they have the tools to be able to support people that may be experiencing challenges there. We've seen some wonderful pictures around the world of clear skies, down to the fact that people are traveling less, there's less air pollution, less particulate pollution. We've seen dolphins return to Venice. We've seen pictures in New Delhi where you can actually see the Himalayas, which haven't been seen for decades. Again, huge improvements, and we've also experienced this in our own backyard in Reading. Lovely blue skies in the centre of town. How do we encourage organisations? How do we encourage individuals as they come back into the new environment to really take climate change seriously? Think about the habits. Think about what they purchase. Think about their own practices at an individual level. And if you were with us a couple of weeks ago when Professor Elizabeth Robinson talked about climate change, you realise her passion that actually it's down to individual choices. We can all make a difference. So what can we do in our own backyard in Reading to make a difference there? And last but not least, for people that whose job it is to look after staff in organisations, typically HR or people in a culture department, this pandemic really is a great opportunity to reflect on how work is being done inside that organisation. How could it be different? How could it be more meaningful? How could it have more purpose? And we know that if people have a purpose in their work, and they're more committed, they're more engaged, actually they live longer, they sleep better, they feel better, they are better. So how can we refashion the workplace so that it is something that people look forward to when they go into work? So with that sort of scene setting, what I'd love to do is to get into the discussion. And we've got, as I mentioned, Rachel, Paul from Cotswold Fair, Bruce from Blake Morgan, Sean from A&D Digital, and Julia from Santander. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, and we'll get into a discussion with them. So perhaps let's kick off with you, Paul. You're not on the screen at the moment for me, but I'm sure you're there because I saw you join us earlier on. So how will business look different? As we come out of this organisation, you've thought deeply about this. You run a very values-based organisation. I know you're members of B Corp as well. You've written a book, which is that business can be a force for good. So from your perspective, how do you think A, businesses will look different, and B, we could be different as well in terms of how influencing other businesses as a community?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Paul Hargreaves from Cotswold Fair. There was a great projection of words onto the side of a Spanish building I saw fairly early on in the pandemic, and it said, "We will not get back to normal because normal was the problem." Of course, it said it in Spanish, not English, but that was the translation. So I think we're at an absolutely key point in our journey as businesses. I think the pandemic's opened people's eyes to see that the old capitalism is dying, and businesses now need to lead the way in making the world a better place, which is probably the opposite of what they have been doing for the last 200 years. Since the Industrial Revolution, there's been a gradual process of commoditization. People have been commoditized, the planet has been commoditized, and even money, the way of exchanging goods, has been commoditized, and that's accelerated massively in the last 50 years. We all know now the planet is dying as businesses have taken from the earth more than they've put back. Fossil fuels have been burnt to excess, and now our planet is literally burning. We've all seen the pictures on the TV. There's more inequality than ever in the history of the world. 42 people have the same wealth as 50% of the world population. I'll repeat that again because it's a shocking stat. You may have heard it before. 42 people have the same wealth added together as the bottom 50% of the global population. The whole system and society is broken. In 2008, our financial systems were shown for what they are, the emperor's new clothes, in effect. We had a huge opportunity at that point to fix what was wrong with capitalism, but unfortunately, we blew it. Last year, many more people across the world realised that the seriousness of climate change and realised that we're killing the planet through our abuse of it. The government even declared a climate emergency, but not a lot's happened since then. We were all saying the fossil fuel age must end. After all, the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones, did it? So this terrible pandemic has brought mass awareness now to the inequality in our workforce. The people that do the real work, the health workers, the supermarket shelf stackers, the van drivers, are paid less in a year than Jeff Bezos earns in 1 minute. Someone has said, we've got a new working class, those who can't work at home. Capitalism is broken. What are we going to do about it? Well, I'll tell you what we've done. Cotswold Fair is a wholesaler to 1,500 retailers of specialty food across the UK. In 2015, we became a B Corp and we changed our articles of association. So it's now illegal for us to put profit before people and planet. We're a founding UK member of a rapidly growing group of companies who are doing exactly that, and that's the B Corporation movement, and I'm an ambassador for that as well. My book, Forces for Good, talks of my journey towards being a company that exists not just for its shareholders, but for all its stakeholders. So we and others, and many of you, have led the way. As a result of the pandemic, I think many, many more people are realising this is the way forward to make the world a better place, and that's the opposite of what business has been doing for the past 200 years. It's a new compassionate capitalism. And I think many, judging by the number of emails and phone calls I've had, including one from the Welsh Government yesterday, they want to know about this new way forward. The planet needs a better way. Consumers will choose a better way. And companies that don't act in a better way after this pandemic, I believe, won't survive.
Well, that's a pretty strong perspective and view there, Paul. It'd be interesting to see the views of our panelists as well as we go through in response to that. Rachel, perhaps you can show some insight here into some of the things that Paul has said, but also in terms of how applicable is it to a company of a small size. I know Hollybrook is around 10 people or so, and when you're small, sometimes it's people make the statement actually you got to focus on surviving. You got to focus on profit. You got to get your small company up and running, and ethics or looking after the greater good is kind of a luxury. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, in fact, we're even smaller than that. And when it comes to employees, we've only got 5 employees. The rest are associates who run their own businesses and work with us. So yeah, we are very little. But as we've discussed before, Gurprit, you started off as Ethical Reading, sort of just as an idea in your minds. But every business starts that way, and I think in a way it's almost impossible to really think about running a business, for me anyway, without it being somewhere that I would want to work. And I think that if your business is going to be successful, it actually has to reflect your values as a founder. And if not, well, why are you even bothering? What's the point? Why not get a job? One of the phrases that's really stuck with me about lockdown has actually been the phrase, the safe employed. Those people who have got jobs where they can be furloughed because they've got an employer, or they've got a job which has continued, and whether that's in the public or the private sector. I think there's been a real distinction, and Paul touched on inequality between those people who are safe employed and the rest of us. And if you're a business owner, you're not one of the safe employed, even if your staff are, even if you're providing that security to your staff. So if you're going to take that risk, if you're going to go out there and try and create something new, to me, I started out by thinking about what I wanted Hollybrook to be like and to have values of. And the products that we've ended up with are quite different from what I thought we would end up offering as our services. But it's been values led, and the values haven't changed. So I think actually in the here and now, as Paul said, if you're going to survive, and if you're thinking of setting up a business, actually starting with what you want your organisation to behave like, what you think your values are, I actually think is a really good way of being. So I've noticed actually with our clients, because obviously we're an accountancy practice and we work with a lot of other SMEs. We've noticed that those clients who've been trying to do the right thing the last few months seem to be bouncing back better than those clients who kind of acted from a place of fear. And I think that perhaps reflects the importance of values.
Super. It's interesting, you mentioned around, echoing Paul's note around surviving, and that companies will only survive if they are values-based, they are authentic. I mean, research does show that particularly the younger generation, when they're thinking about where they're going to work, over 60%, something like 65%, would prefer to work in an organisation that has a positive impact on society. Yeah. That really brings something has a purpose and positive impact on society is the area. So certainly from the younger generation, I think it's very relevant if you're going to attract the best talent that's out there inside your organisation. That's very, very important. Okay, let's turn to Bruce. Perhaps Bruce, And Bruce is the chairman of Blake Morgan. Bruce, from your perspective, how do you think the pandemic will change the way you provide services? You're a law firm. How do you think it will change the way you provide services, your interaction with clients? And when we're thinking about the new normal, how would you factor that into those interactions and those services as you go forward?
Hi, yes, good morning, everybody. I think the first thing I'd say is that we cover services from both in the Thames Valley, south of England, and also London and Wales. So we've got a broad cross-section, sort of 800 people. In some ways, I envy some of the other speakers in terms of there's a few of you can get together. In some ways, we're a custodian and trying to get a bellwether across a wider range of people. But having said that, I would pick up a couple of themes about services, particularly, not that I think will change, but have already changed in terms of, I think, the flexibility of the way that our staff work and we require staff to work has already changed. And I think that's really welcome. We always had the possibility of doing it with the technology, I think, in many cases. But now somehow there's not just a license, but also an imperative, I think, to recognize that flexibility. The second thing is I think the way that I've talked to our colleagues is sort of more human, the way that we're delivering services now. In a strange way, the virtual world we've entered means that we do look at people. We see, oh, yes, they do have children who run around in the back. They actually have lives, and that sounds great. And I think that works in terms of, some lawyers, and even the photograph on the fly suggests I'm not a stuffy lawyer with a tie on. But actually, I do have a life. I've got a garden out there and the birds singing. I live a life like that, and I think it's not, you're not changing your standards, but you're changing the how you deliver. And I think the third thing is actually the importance of relationships, and a couple of people have talked about that already. I feel I know a lot of both my own staff, which is maybe a criticism, but also I know my staff and also my clients a lot better. An anecdote is that there's a particularly large client of ours, and I now know that my lead contact there has a cat called Bianca who will walk across the screen. Well, actually, that helps me relate to her much better when I've got a really difficult issue. So I think there are already changes from the way we have interacted, which will fix. I think going forward in terms of the way we service and meet things, I think one of the things we've recognised is there's not merely flexibility, but there is choice about the way you deliver services and also deliver services. And that's not a choice that's an academic choice now. I think it'll be an enforced and an expected choice from employers and actually our clients who will say, I may not necessarily want it done the way you've always done it. So I like that approach. And I think that's really important in terms of the flexibility. I think hopefully there is a final death knell of presentism. You've got to be in the office to be noticed. It would be interesting to have a question with other people about how in a virtual world you do make your networks, and I think other speakers may have something to say about this, in a virtual environment. But I think that's certainly important. And finally, I think the focus on well-being that all of us have had to do, it's been something that's been bubbling there. But I think it's not just a simple well-being, oh, great, I can come back, I need to get back into the office, or I want to stay at home. It's a recognition of a blend and different people's expectations about what their well-being. And I think that's going to lead us to have to look at a much more diverse view of where we are as employers and colleagues and accept that diversity. We've talked about diversity in different ways, but I think it also relates to how do I work and when do I work? So lots of changes of which come, and I hope that many of them will stay. I think in some ways the ship has sailed on many of them, I hope.
Brilliant, brilliant. Lots of good stuff there. I think lots of food for thought. I think in terms of the primacy of relationships and flexibility in all its forms. I think there's that really is something I think will be a common theme as we come out of this. Moving on to Sean. Sean is from A&D Digital, and A&D Digital, another very values-based organisation that puts a lot of focus on people, but also actually puts it into practice in terms of how you operate as well and how you're structured. So I was fascinated to learn, Sean, when we started talking, that you're based around this notion of your structure as an organisation is based around small groups called squads, and then squads make up clubs, and you can only have so many clubs in a particular region. I mean, you're a nationwide organisation, so you've got about 600 odd people, quite significant. So can you explain a little bit around how you're structured and why you're structured that way? But also, the other thing that struck me was the kind of relationships you build with your clients are different in an interesting way, and perhaps you'll elucidate around that as well.
Yes. Yes. So what we really believe in at And Digital is that in order for us to function as a true community and a true company where people feel included, where people feel part of something important, you can't really be more than 100 people. The minute you start getting too big, you lose that feeling, really. So the club model really enables us to create those communities across the UK. So yes, we've grown to 700 people in the last 5 years, but in actual fact, if you join a club, you will only ever feel part of a community which can only grow to a maximum of 100 people. And when you do join as part of a squad, and a squad is made up of 12 people. And when you join, which is great, you join together as one squad. So you don't join sort of, if you think of any company, you kind of join randomly on random dates. But what we do is we actually bring everyone together on a date. So it might be the beginning of the month. And then you do a 3-week boot camp where you get together as a team, all 12 of you, and you work through. The first week is around how you work as an individual. So it's about your preferences. It's about, we teach people about unconscious bias. We teach people about our values, which are wonder, share, and delight. And essentially wonder being, about really innovation and really inspiring people to do things differently and to innovate in the way that they work. Sharing is about, obviously, sharing amongst ourselves. There's a great quote that we use from Ahmed Ray, which is small mind competes, big mind collaborates, and great mind encompasses. And that's kind of the what we use. And then delight is really about, we want to obviously delight our clients, but even in the club model, we want to delight each other. So those 3 weeks, they do a project together. So people really bond as a team, and it really creates a great bonding mechanism for the whole club. So from a structure perspective, that's a great way to really start your whole existence in And. And something that we do particularly in Reading is we've based our whole club culture on it's not Nelson Mandela, but on the South African concept of Ubuntu, which is I am who I am because of who you are. So that whole concept of I can't exist if I don't have someone else there to share, my experiences, my values. So it's really, really critical to how we function. And then at a bigger And level, what makes us quite unique is that we believe in closing the digital skills gap. So we go into companies as partners, and our role specifically is to build capability within those companies and to build the skills within those companies. So we would go in with a team and potentially build products, but at the same time, we're building the capability within the company. So in effect, we could walk away at the end of that interaction and engagement, so that the company is left behind with the ability to self-perform. And the reason we do that is we really believe that companies, especially in this new world, and actually post-COVID, this is even more imperative, that companies have the ability to manage their own digital existence, because it's almost core to their being. And that's why we called and digital, because we believe that everything you do, it doesn't matter whether you're a retailer or you're in financial services, you need to have digital has to be core to your business model. And the reason why it works for us is because most companies have ambition, and there are times when they need to flex and there are times when they don't. So we can come in and help you when you're in the flex mode. We can come in and help you when you're not sure of your ambition. So really it works for us in a number of different ways. And it's an exciting thing to be part of if you're an Andy, because you get to see and work with other people, and you get to share and wonder and delight in your day-to-day world. So that's sort of a synopsis of what we do.
Super, and it certainly comes across. I mean, talking to your colleagues and people working there, Alina and Gaurav and other colleagues, that kind of enthusiasm comes across. Fabulous. I want to turn now to Julia. So, there you are, Julia. So Julia works for Santander, and of course all banks have had their challenges over the last few years, but Santander has really gone through a significant reworking, actually, in terms of how they think about their business, how they think about actually measuring success as well, and then rewarding their staff. So perhaps, Julia, you can sort of elaborate on that a little bit as well, and how it's changed over the last 2 or 3 years and what impact that's had.
Yeah, so hi everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me. I feel quite humbled to be on here with all you guys, and coming from a bank. I know sometimes not the most popular, but I think all banks have had to reflect, and some of that was forced and some of it was by choice, around how we measure success. So nobody would be surprised that the days of counting products that we sold and rewarding people on the back of that was there, and I was part of it, and I engaged in it, loved it, competition, etc. But whether it was forced or decided, Santander are on a journey, and I say we're still on a journey because we have a goal of helping people and businesses prosper, which out and being inclusive and ethical, etc., which is quite a broad statement. But unless everyone within the organisation believes that and sees those behaviours and sees that from the leadership teams and above, it will never happen. So we moved from achieving targets to actually how we deliver. So yes, we're a business, and yes, we're beholden to our shareholders, etc. But we're more interested, and I'm more interested in how people do what they do. Okay, so you sometimes achieve the target but completely miss the point, and that's where we were. And actually now we're in a position where we can recognise people for doing the right thing. So we have a set of behaviours. And I actually thought I was really decent at delivering on these until COVID-19 hit. So when I think about active collaboration, which I thought I was great at, I was really great at it within my sphere of influence. I hadn't actually reached out to any other department within the bank. And because I've been really actively involved in the Bounce Back scheme and the CBIL scheme before that, I've met project managers, digital whizzes, I can't call them anything else. I've dealt with people in operations departments, etc. And I've met every one of them on Zoom. Okay, and I want to kind of pull back on some of the things I've heard from the other panelists. So authenticity. I don't think you can't be authentic when you're in your face and you're looking at yourself on Zoom 22 times a day. And actually you can see the family behind. So I've got a new puppy and that's running around, and I've got a load of regional managers that actually have children, and they're bouncing one on their knee while we're talking about something, or the guy who calls at the doorbell and they've got some delivery, etc. And it does humanise the people that you work with. So which I've met a broad range of people I would never have had the opportunity to do so. And that's also allowed me to see the passion. So the passion that they bring to their role. You think you're important, you're not important, you're just a part of a huge machine that delivers something at the end of it. Being able to talk straight. So the opportunity I've had is actually to say, that's not right. That doesn't work for customers. That's not customer centric. That's not helping customers prosper. That's too complicated. That's not helping our colleagues. We need to simplify things. And then embrace change is one of ours, right? And I think this has been a real opportunity to meet different people, but also for some people that didn't quite shine in their environment to actually step forward and shine and actually create a career for themselves. I think actually I want to do something else. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start a new business, build new skills that they would never have had before. And actually when they're talking about performance or how they've delivered in half one, it's all about how they've done stuff. I actively collaborated with this person. I created a new process with this team. I actually helped a colleague who was struggling with their workload because they had children to juggle and I don't. I can focus. And I think the other thing is when I think about an inclusive and diverse workforce, which is what we are passionate about, more women on the board, more senior leadership from women, etc. This scenario where we've given loads of people that were in branches, in call centres, stuck into a routine, a laptop. They can work from home. They can work more flexibly. That means they can actually think about that next job without worrying about childcare, be that a man or a woman. I've seen so many people being able to flourish because they're not structured in regime, and I have to get up at this time and I have to get out at this time and I have to put my child into childcare. There's a lot more juggling, which I believe will allow people to develop, feel more included in things, and not that next step, whatever they want to do, is nearer than it was before all of this happened, and allowed us to reflect on how we work. So hopefully that's a view of where I work, and that's why I work for Santander. I enjoy working for them because I do feel we deliver on what we say we're going to do, and that part of my job is to make sure that I give everybody the opportunity to shine.
Super. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Julia. Given the time, I just wanted to open up to the general audience here for some Q&A. So does anybody have any questions that they would like to raise to our panelists? If not, do our panelists have any questions for any of our other panelists? Yeah, Rachel, you raise your hand.
So I'm normally a real optimist, but I'm going to just share a challenge I think that we have, because we've so far been quite upbeat and positive about all the opportunities, and I absolutely agree. And I think what Julia was just saying was absolutely spot on. But one of the things I've seen in my other role as deputy mayor is the inequality that Paul touched on has been exacerbated by this crisis. I see the difference between the people who are sort of enjoying the ability to cycle on the quiet roads and buy their local hipster beer, and I contrast that in my mind with just one example, there's loads, but one example that really stayed with me of I helped to deliver a food parcel to a lady who was previously working full-time as a cleaner. She's now down to 5, maybe 6 hours a week work from her employer. She's got a little girl, and the little girl's not able to go to school at the moment because she has health issues. So even when school is back, she's not being able to go back because she's shielding her. And that lady was desperate for colouring pencils for her daughter. And I think that we need to think about, what do we do as a society about that? Inequality was already stark in this country, but we're heading towards 3 million unemployed, and I really hope that everyone who's currently furloughed gets their jobs back, but the reality is they may not. So this could get worse before it gets better. And I mean, it's not for the business community solely to solve, but I do wonder what we can do in Reading to try and to attack that. You know, those two scenarios I talked about are people living within maybe a mile of each other.
One of the things I think is also quite prevalent is the fact with all of this is that a lot of families don't have access to phones or digital devices. So they're now expected to educate their children on a device that they don't have. I think I read an article, one family had one phone between all of them. So I think they certainly, for me, I know there are a couple of devices now and there are a couple of other organizations that maybe in Reading we could link into or link up with. We've been trying to link up with them, but it's quite difficult because they're all so busy. The problem with the charities at the moment is they are all inundated and so busy they don't actually have the capacity to give you the time to do what you need to do. But it feels that there's something that we should be doing, maybe linking in with the schools and the families to see if there's something we can do in terms of sort of closing that gap potentially where people need devices or help, because there are a lot of great things that are out there that can help people teach their kids. And I know we're supposed to be going back to school in September, but I know also there are a lot of families that are nervous to go back to school in September.
A great point, Sean. Actually, there's the RVA, Reading Voluntary Action, Rachel Spencer, is very passionate about this area. About digital inclusion, and they've been running a program, have run programs around that for a while. So I'm sure there are things we can do. I mean, if you look at most of us on here, we're using PCs. I know I've got about 2 or 3 PCs that are slightly older but perfectly usable, lying in cupboards somewhere, and I'm sure that's the same, for a number of us. So, in terms of devices, making those, available, just things like broadband.
Yeah, I think the point is there that we're talking about this now. The inequality's always been there. 30 years ago, I worked in the inner city for a charity. The inequality's already been there. The reason I'm hopeful now is the pandemic's exposed the inequality. So finally, we might be able to or governments and companies are willing to do something about it. That's why I'm optimistic, I think, about the way forward.
If I could add something as well, I think we sometimes, because we're all on this call IT enabled, we take for granted, I think what Julia said, giving somebody a laptop, which most of it had for donkey's years, is actually liberating and enabling in a way that's hard to imagine. I think the schools point that Sean made is really important. My wife's a teacher, and she can see the digital divide opening amongst her pupils at the age of 9 or 10 between those who do and don't. And if, as a region, talking now in terms of Reading, we don't reach out to have those basic enabling skills, we're going to have a greater digital divide between those who can and skills, and it's part of their life. And that will help affect us both regionally, but also in terms of the cohesion of what we're trying to create after COVID.
Absolutely. And in many ways, it would be ironic, wouldn't it? Given the fact that we're considered in Reading, the kind of Silicon, not the Silicon Glen, but the Silicon M4 corridor somehow, if you like. We've got so many IT companies here, and we've got the highest concentration of IT workers. Given all of that, it would make, it would be really ironic if, there are large portions of our community that don't feel included from a digital perspective. And there are, particularly the elderly, if you think about those, and new migrants, and as Sean was pointing out, people just can't afford things like a broadband, high-speed broadband connection.
Gurprit, I think it's also interesting. So I work across the southwest and central, and you'd all tell I'm from Devon, but actually I'm from Durham, but I live in Devon, and I'm quite fortunate to live there. It's a beautiful place to live. But that also allows me to work as the chair of a non-exec board for a multi-academy trust. So when you're talking about skills, I understand that, and it's in quite a poor area of Plymouth that the skills are based, and we have had some amazing support from local businesses down in Devon that have supported the children, because it's a high propensity of children that need support or are classed as vulnerable, etc. But on the other point, my husband's a bridge player, and he supports a couple of bridge clubs down in Devon. And obviously there's an elderly population that plays bridge. It's hopefully not going to die out. But he's actually led the challenge to get all of those older people onto online bridge, the BBO. And he's had such amazing feedback. Yeah. And if you think about the fact that possibly was the only interaction those people had socially every week, and that was taken away from them in March, and they might never get back to playing bridge in these social groups. They've gone online, even with the cheapest little iPad, and he's done little sessions over the phone to tell them how to get on. So again, it's given us the opportunity to think, how else can we communicate, and how else can we make sure we look after the more vulnerable in society if we can't get out and be in social events, etc.
And of course, some of these things are structural, aren't they? Some of these things are, when you talk about, things like taxation and so on, these are areas that, central government and the big institutions will have a say and make decisions on. But what can we do locally? So this is, ethical rating is particularly about local activism and local focus. And I think if we can focus on and come up with, and actually we've got a session on the 17th, which is like a local business summit, where we're organising with our with the charity sector, with Reading Borough Council, so the council leaders will be on it, with the university, the chancellor will be on it, and local businesses. What we're trying to do is identify a few things that we in Reading can do to address some of these issues and challenges. So, if you're a business leader, if you would like to be on that, it would be fabulous if you could, if you just drop us a note, make sure send out an invite to that. Any other thoughts from perhaps some of the people who've joined us, other than the panelists, around what you've heard? Perhaps another sort of dissenting point of view. No. Okie dokie. So it's coming up to about 10:15.
Two people had their hands up.
Oh, sorry, who was that?
Nigel had his hand up, and Linda.
Okay. Linda, do you want to go first?
I don't know how to unmute myself. Yeah, thanks for that, Clinton and Gurprit. Yeah, I'm wondering if we can put some concern towards young people and unemployment among the, say, 16 to 25s, if there's anything that we can do to generate jobs or trainings, or, with our businesses and our business communities, how can we help them in some way? Absolutely.
I think it's it's a terrible situation for people who are just coming out of university, who are finishing school and looking for some sort of meaningful employment. Absolutely. Nigel.
Well, I didn't want to come up with anything controversial, but I just wanted to say, well, apart from this has been sandbite heaven, I think. I've been scribbling down all these wonderful little phrases that I haven't heard before, so thank you all for that. But in terms of something you said right at the top of the session, I think it is an opportunity to do things differently. As an example of why some people think it's just a little hiatus and then we go back to how things were, one of the things I belong to is Reading Rotary Club, and we're meeting via Zoom, of course, at the moment. And a number of the members are just sort of talking about, well, when we go back to meeting over lunch, and, they're just waiting for the old world to be resumed. Well, in 2 years' time, we've got our 100th anniversary in Reading Rotary Club. And, it's a thing that needs to be dragged forward. We do a lot of great stuff, but some of the ways that we carry on, could be doing with modernising. And I'm thinking, this is great. Now we're meeting by Zoom. We can carry on meeting at least half the time by Zoom. But it's interesting how a number of people just think, no, let's just get through this and then we go back to how it was. And I think that is going to be one of that sort of inertia is going to be one of the problems, that it is an opportunity. We've got to grasp it and not go back to how things were.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great summary in many ways of the discussion so far. I mean, lots of really valuable insights and thoughts and ideas as well in terms of how things could be. Looking at some of the different organisations and leaders that have talked about their places of work, things can be different. They don't have to be. It doesn't have to be a toxic work culture, and we can create a more compassionate, a fairer, and more respectful workplace. So let's go back to. I'm going to just finish off this session and share my screen again. Okie dokie. And talk a little bit about the second part. So we're going to kick off from 11 onwards with the second part of the session, and this is divided into two streams. And this is all about, well, how do you start creating an environment somewhat similar to some of the workplaces we've heard Paul and Sean and others talk about. How do we start doing that? And of course, tap into them and understand about those organisations better. At the same time, I'm pleased to say we are actually now partnering with a number of experts around tools and advice and guidance on how you can do that. So this is under the term ethical rating services, and the foundation here is really the values, the culture. This is about setting the tone and example from leadership all the way down and all the way up. So everybody in our perspective can be a leader. It's all about influencing people. So it's about creating a values-based environment, as we said, which is fair, it's compassionate, respectful, but at the same time, people understand their responsibilities and duties and obligations, both to themselves and to others. And if you create such an environment, there's an awful lot of research out there, and I've just got a couple of bullet points here which show that actually people are happier. They are, if they have a purpose in what they do, they feel they're making a positive impact in their work, and they are much happier also to take on additional responsibility and being accountable, and also actually more creative as well. What this in turn leads to actually is improved well-being for people who are working in such places. They sleep better, they live longer, they feel happier, they're more engaged. And because they're more engaged, what you end up with is actually people who actually deliver better results. So you get exceptional performance. And this is a sustainable approach to delivering exceptional performance. Of course, if you pay people money, you can get a short-term boost, but it's not sustainable. You really need to think about that vibrant, values-based, ethical environment. So I'm delighted to welcome our speakers for the next part. As I said, there are two streams, and in totality, we literally have centuries of experience here. So quickly to run through. So Clinton has over 40 years experience working with HR departments in HR around performance management, developing teams, and his particular specialities around values-based, ethics-based, high-performance teams. I'm delighted to welcome Clinton to the session, and so that would be a very interesting session. Miriam has a PhD in neuroscience, really understands from a psychological level how people are driven, what motivates them. So again, fantastic session there. Dan is an ethicist and lectures for Oxford University. He's actually one of the reasons why ethical rating is around. He taught me ethics, so it was really out of those sessions that ethical rating was born. So Dan is going to be talking about sustainability, the ethics of sustainability today. Ram has a PhD from Manchester, and it's related to values-driven performance, particularly in terms of how do you measure that? How can you benchmark it against other organizations? How can you use it to improve relationships inside your organization? Ram will have some fantastic insights should you want to follow the culture stream. On the well-being stream, I'm delighted to welcome some fabulous ladies and Mark to the session. So Anne-Marie is well known throughout the local area as being fabulous proponent of mental health training and workshops. She's done a number of workshops for us. Fantastic feedback. Likewise, Judy, particularly when it comes to mindfulness and balancing your working life with other aspects of your life. So Judy leads Balanced Time. So fabulous insights into how you can reflect on and then take action in terms of the challenges and stresses you have in work. Mark, again, is a specialist in mindfulness, but also in resilience and mental health. So a broad range. I used to work with Mark in the past, passionate guy who comes across very well in terms of conveying his ideas. And I'm sure you'll love the session that Mark's going to give. And Emma Campolucci has been a regular supporter of ours over a number of events, workshops, all of which have been very highly rated, particularly around mental health, but also around listening skills, relationship skills, and particularly in sort of applying them in the work environment as well. So I hope you will join us for the second half. If you would like to join the wellbeing stream, you have to do nothing. You can just stay on this link. If you want to join the culture stream, you need to click on the culture link that was in your invite. And I'm sure Margaret and our co-host will post that link again through the chat window. And so we have a 2 to 3 minute gap now. If you would like to get a quick cup of tea or go to have a loo break, whatever, that's up to you. And we'll join you shortly on the appropriate stream. Thanks very much for joining us. If you need to get away, but we hope you stay. See you soon.